My name is Joseph Craven, and this is Running Out the Clock.
Woo.
And I guess that's where like the theme music would play. I don't know. Is that our theme music?
Yeah, why not?
My name is Joseph Craven, that's Ro Hunter, and we are here to take you to Funky Town. This is ROTC, and I am your friend Joseph Craven, and as I mentioned, that is Ro Hunter coming in via satellite out on the road.
Bro, we're taking this show on the road, man. That's what we're doing.
He's doing a little bit of he's doing a scouting report on the University of Georgia, like going out to Georgia right now.
Technically, I'm in the state of Georgia. I think I'm like 3 hours away from Athens, but you know, I mean, everybody around here is pretty much a Georgia fan. Couple Tech fans you'll see every now and then, but you know.
Well, to be fair, I didn't say that you were like at the University of Georgia.
Oh,
I just
that's
said
true.
You went to Georgia and you were like reading Athlon's Georgia preview from a hotel room somewhere. That's the type of scouting you were doing.
Oh yeah, 1,100%.
Well, this is Running Out the Clock. I am your friend Joseph Craven, and I am, of course, joined by, as I mentioned earlier, Ro Hunter, who is on the road right now, reporting, calling in via satellite. Do you remember the days when people had to do that when they were on the news? It's like via satellite.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Via satellite
Joining
phone.
us via satellite is Ro Hunter. I think that was supposed to be a Tom Brokaw. I just kind of did it, and then as it went, I was like, I think I'm trying to mimic Tom Brokaw right now, and it did not do a very good job with it.
Tom Brokaw.
Joining us via satellite is Ro Hunter. No, that was even worse than the first one. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Dude, do you? Well, I mean, you're trying. You're really trying. I prefer the old days of like where they would be like, "That's just in. The Bowery Boys come down from the streets and whip all of the union workers." Now back to your scheduled program. I don't know why newscasters don't talk like that anymore. Like that, it would be so
it was just
good.
part of the times, you know. Oh, breaking news and what believe it all, but look at her.
A million.
I don't. You know, I was watching. Ellie and I decided to watch the original first pilot episode of Veronica Mars just earlier tonight because we'd never seen it. And I don't know if you're familiar with the old show Veronica Mars at all, but it was, yeah,
Oh, of course.
but it was,
yeah.
it's supposed to be modeled after those old timey detective dramas, you know, which is why there's so much like voiceover narration and all of that. And Ellie's asking me why, and I was like, oh, you know those old dramas where it's like, I think I was like, she was a dame who you could see from a mile away, you know, and like, this is just the most old timey evening I've ever had. Speaking of old timey, Nick Saban.
Speaking of those roll tides.
Oh, Nick Saban, the crotchetiest coach in the world, is entering his, it's hard to believe it, the what'd you say it was, 13th year now?
13th year, bro.
Yeah. 2007, he jumps in, takes a 6-7 program, turns them into a very successful 7-6 program, but then it is double-digit wins ever since then, 5 different national titles. But then, of course, every now and then you have years like last year that cause Nick to just want to complain about everything, including the players leaving for the NFL early. That was a major one that he was really, really upset about this past year. And I want to bring it up more when we get to talking about Alabama's defense for this season. But basically since then, I mean, as part of his, I guess, reputation, I assume it's, you know, when you've got a quote unquote reputation, it's really easy to take a 6-win team, a 7-win team and turn them into national titles, you know, champs in 3 years based off of only reputation and nothing illegal at all, you know. But based off of that, he's had huge success since then and massive recruiting victories, so on and so forth. It brings it brings to mind this important question to start things off, Ro. If we're trying to record a preview about the Alabama Crimson Tide, where in the world do we even start? Like, how do you preview Alabama, perennial powerhouse, perennial favorites to win the title? How do you even preview them? What do you do with this?
Well, if it could be summed up in a sentence, basically, Tua, the Hawaiian sensation Tagovailoa, has to stay healthy, and they should probably win everything if he's able to do that.
So you do think, first and foremost, that he is the focal point, he is the centerpiece, he is going to be the key to
dude, like, come on now. They have the best receiving core in all of college football with Jerry Jeudy, the other guy, Jalen Waddle, I think he finished second last year. I mean, they are an amazing. They have so much talent. It's a stupid thing about Alabama. We have to like say it all the time. Like, they just replace their guys when they go. Boogity, boogity, boogity. That's all I hear when anybody, Colin Cowherd or Lou Holtz, God rest his soul,
Colin Cowherd on this podcast.
That's all they say. It's like, wow, the Alabama Crimson Tide, they just graduated 72 seniors, but no worries, they're back on top again. That's how it's been for the last 13 years. And color me a little jaded, Joseph. I'm a little jaded.
Understandably so.
I'm over it.
Well, I mean, I feel like, and I'm curious now what your thoughts are, but I feel like we are reaching the age here where, like, the best program in the country is Clemson and not Alabama.
You would think. You really would think that.
And you don't feel that way at all? I feel like we're starting to air that way.
No, dude. No. It was a fluke, dude. Those Alabama pockets run deep, and they pay those refs handsomely. You think for 1 second that they're not going to win a national champion this year, and with a resounding score of like 86-3, like it'll be against Clemson this year. But no, I think deep down, Nick Saban, he's probably had the picture of all of the Clemson football players, plus what's his face? What's the Clemson? I'm drawing a blank right now. Dabo, yeah. Dabo, like, I bet you he has Dabo's picture plastered on his walls. I bet he's got him superimposed on all of his family portraits and stuff. Just looking at him, going like, "I'm gonna."
I actually think it's just one photo, and like you go into Nick Saban's bedroom, and there's nothing in there. There's a cot that his tiny self sleeps on, and it's one photo of Clemson eating Big Macs at the White House. And it's just hung on the ceiling, or it's hung on the wall right above the tiny cot, and that's all Nick Saban has to look at and see.
Yes, dude, I like your version better. I think that's true. I honest to God think that I just think the powers that be, aka all of the alumni in Alabama, will not allow them to go, missing out on the national championship again. It's like if they do. I'm pretty sure they all believe that, like, Satan himself will come back if they miss another national championship. Well, I mean, so it's not going to happen.
NCAA's got to put up a front to make it look like, other teams have a chance.
Yeah.
No, I do think Clemson is. I think Clemson's up there. I think part of that is due to the stuff that Nick Saban hates so much, like players leaving early for the NFL. Stuff like that.
Sure.
But, we'll discuss that a little bit more in a little bit, I guess. Let's take a look at the offense. Obviously, we mentioned this is the area in which Alabama has, like, basically nothing to worry about because they return just about everyone of note on offense. Obviously, you mentioned preseason Heisman Trophy winner Tua Tagovailoa. You've mentioned Jerry the Cadillac Bandit Jeudy. You've mentioned
Jerry the Cadillac Bandit.
A little Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference, everyone. And the rest of that very deep receiving core. Some of the names that you already mentioned, like Jalen Waddle, Henry Ruggs.
Devonta Smith, and then they got another amazing freshman, and John Mechie, I think is his name.
It runs deep, and then along with that, you've got the never-ending slew of Alabama running backs who are probably not actually as great as they seem, but because they're Alabama running backs, they will all they're phenomenal. You could put anyone back there, and they're going to be 1,000-yard. Like you and I could probably be 1,000-yard rusher.
Dude, I know I could, man. All 175 pounds of this 5'11" frame, dude. Like, come on, bro. I'll be trucking people, man.
But I mean, that's like the one area in which they actually lost some players, but those players are probably replaced by more talented guys.
But they are, though. They are, because only Alabama could lose Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs and potentially have a stronger running game next year with 6'2", 227-pound Najee Harris. He has the speed to go along with the size. And then, and by the way, they also have another guy who's 1 inch shorter at 6'1" and 1 pound lighter at 226 pounds in Brian Robertson, who also has the speed to go along with the size. Like,
I think it's going to be Najee Harris and freshman Trey Sanders. I think they're going to mix it up there, and have the big guy and then the shiftier guy in Trey Sanders, more so than Brian Robinson. But yes, Najee Harris, Derrick Henry Jr., coming in hot there. There's nothing to be worried about here. The only thing that is a bit of a concern, and I think Nick Saban knows this more than anything else, because he's one of those coaches that has always understood that victory is at the line of scrimmage. The offensive line might have some question marks here, which would be pretty rare for an Alabama team, because Alabama has always had, we were just joking about it, they've always had an offensive line under Nick Saban that is going to pave the way for whoever's back there. Look at Mark Ingram.
Yeah.
Mark Ingram, a guy that rode the backs of his offensive line straight to a Heisman Trophy in a year in which he was not overly impressive. It's that sort of thing. They've always had that line, and this is the year that maybe there's a little bit more question marks there, because they don't have clear-cut, like, rising starters at most of the offensive line positions. The difference is here being that this is Alabama. So naturally, if you look at recruiting classes over the past 2 or 3 years, like 50% of their recruiting classes are offensive and defensive linemen, because they know that success. They know the importance of that success. They just do, including a 6'8", 360-pound teammate, Evan Neal, teammate of Trey Sanders.
What? That dude is a giant. That guy should be in a strongest man contest. Get out of the football. Go away.
Get out of football.
Go away, dude. Like, go fight crime or be an MMA fighter. Like, stop, dude. Like, you're ruining this for everyone.
Oh my god!
Like, are you serious? He's 6'8", and he's 360 pounds.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's listed at only 6'7" on the Alabama website.
Man. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
My bad. Didn't mean to miss either.
And he's on their offensive line.
Yeah,
okay,
didn't mean
great.
to lead anyone astray. And of course, naturally, you look up pictures of him, and it's like, 360 pounds, and and he is not he's not exactly a fat boy.
I'm looking him up right now. Yeah, no, he's the opposite of a fat boy. He doesn't look to have one piece of pudge on him. He's huge, man.
Oh gosh, what was the name of the terrifying Baylor defensive lineman, the 6'9" guy a few years back? I'm drawing a blank on his name. But,
I know you're talking about. I don't
forget his name. But anyway, that guy was terrifying. This is like a similar thing. He's not as muscular, but he's just huge and slim. He's exactly what you look for in a modern day offensive lineman. So I don't know.
Or, dude, that guy could be he could play anywhere, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
God. Get that man a basketball.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no,
That's how much Zion. I think that's how much Zion weighs, like the exact stats and everything.
Zion's actually bigger. Zion weighed in at 385, if I remember correctly.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Even more
385,
insanity.
yeah.
Just even more insanity. But yeah, I mean, if you look at that offense, that's the only possible weakness I can find is that they have like less clear cut, rising starters. They have more competition on the offensive line. That being said, I don't know. It's Alabama. It's the Alabama offensive line factory, And even when their offensive line is a little bit weaker, possibly, than it is normally, they happen to have a generational quarterback who is the most dynamic playmaker at quarterback that they've probably ever had in program history, in Tua, who can lighten the load there and be a guy that they don't have to always have flawless protection for. Like, if you put this offensive line and, like, Jake Coker, that was the guy's name, right, that won the title with him?
Yeah. I think,
You put him back there, it's not going to be the same. He's not going to do as well, but Tua can overcome that sort of thing. So, so that's the only maybe concern. Offense looking fine for the Tide, I feel like. And it's probably going to be, Tua threw for almost 4,000 yards last season, if I remember correctly. Yeah. I had it up in front of me here. Yeah. 3,966 yards and 43 touchdowns through the air. So he can sling the ball around. This is going to be maybe the most high-powered offense that Alabama's had.
Oh, 100%. There's no doubt about that. I think they ranked I just had it pulled up here a second ago. They were the nation's. They finished the year with the most efficient game and averaged 522 total yards, 46 points per outing. This is an easy segue right here because not only do they have probably the game's most potential, the biggest potential of the wide receivers, just explosive offense. Last year they had on defensive side of the ball, the really only glaring weakness that they had was that secondary. Like Jake Fromm, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence all put up really good games against them. And I think all three of those guys were close to 1,000 yards passing with 8 touchdowns and no picks. However, that was last year.
Yeah.
And by any reasonable, let's just say any other team, you'd be like, oh man, this is going to be a big problem this year. But it's Alabama, and their secondary this year is pretty much NFL ready. You have junior safety Xavier McKinney. He was 3rd on the team in tackles. Senior Jared Maiden is at free safety. But then you also have a guy in Jordan Battle out of Florida who is apparently just killing it at practice. But they are going to be absolutely great again on defense. I think under Nick Saban, the normal standard for him is way different than everybody else's normal standard.
Yeah.
They were incredible last year. They only gave up 18 points per game and 320 yards, but Nick Saban probably developed his 6th hemorrhoid after they eclipsed 300.
Have you tacked that one up on the Nick Saban hemorrhoid tracker that we got hanging up in ROTC studio?
Does he just answer me this? Does he not look like a hemorrhoid? Just the embodiment of a whole personified hemorrhoid. That's what he looks like, right?
Every time that the camera cuts to the sidelines and you see him getting in the face of a 19-year-old kid and just shaking uncontrollably as he yells angrily at them, then yeah, you're exactly right. I imagine that is that's the human equivalent of the pain and misery that goes along with having hemorrhoids.
He does, man. And you would think with a comparable defense last year that was elite with NFL ready players was our Mississippi State University. Great players, great front, great secondary, 4 first-round draft picks. It was amazing.
Yeah, one of the statistically best defenses in the country.
Yeah, Nick Saban would have hated our defense last year. He would have hated it. He would have been like, "This, they don't perform adequately. I hate 19-year-old boys.
Why are we only second in the country in scoring defense?
Why aren't we -1 in the country?
Yeah.
We need to be better than first.
We ought to be scoring. We ought to be positive point. We ought to be scoring more points the other team's offense."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah. And they ran through our ass like crap. Through a tiny horn, man, and we couldn't stop them. You couldn't stop them. That is a direct Nick Saban quote.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. It's what maybe is interesting about, and this is not to go back to the offense, of course, but what was really interesting about the offense last season is the fact that it was such a departure from what Alabama had been doing for so long, in that they were always just this really dominant power run game with an untouchable offensive line and a quarterback that had like a primary target. Think Amari Cooper or Julio Jones and that sort of thing. Had the unstoppable target. That sort of thing, and that's what they were built it around. And then last year, it is when they really started to fully embrace the modern football game. Maybe not started. They really did when Jalen Hurts got there. Is when they embraced the modern football game of like a dual threat quarterback who has multiple targets to go towards and a little bit more high paced, up tempo. And it didn't work out for him last year in terms of winning the title, but they were so close to. Going completely undefeated. And it's the only time under Saban that I think they've lost by more than 14 points.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
You're right.
So along with that, on the defensive side, I promised you that we were not going back to offense. I was just using that.
I'm glad you did go back to the offense because I think it's a great point that you just made about how Alabama they really have shifted their offense now. I think that was Coach Saban's idea when they brought on Lane Kiffin a while ago, before all of the craziness or whatever, that I think he wanted to be more kind of pass heavy than what they currently were. But at the same time, though, we can go back and look at I just want to name off a few names from the time when you and I were in college since Nick Saban has been there.
Yeah.
All right. Kenneth Darby.
Legend.
He was phenomenal. Glenn Coffey, little known Glenn Coffey. You remember Glenn Coffey?
I remember Glenn Coffey.
Glenn Coffey, and then these aren't in any order at all. These are just ones in the last 10 years. Glenn Coffey, Bo Scarborough, Trent Richardson, T.J. Yeldon, Eddie Lacy, Kenyon Drake, Damian Harris, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram. All of those guys, everyone that I just mentioned, except for Kenneth Darby, I think. All those dudes are first round, second round talent in the NFL.
In the NBA, that's just how deep they are. That's how athletic they are.
Bro, that's how, dude. They're basically a bunch of Bo Jacksons on the field, man.
Right.
So on one hand, you can understand that what if you have those players coming in and out of your university, you have to run the football. I mean, college Mark Ingram, bro, he was amazing. He was unreal.
I didn't think so. I thought he was really overrated in college.
Dude, I think you're probably a little right about that, but where I would disagree with you is that he seemed when you watched him play all those years ago. It's been 9 years now that he last played for Alabama. When you watched him play back then, he looked different than most other running backs that were at the time. I think at the same time Mark Ingram kind of got his fame or whatever.
He looked different. Do you just mean because he was 4 feet tall?
Yes. He was small and like a bowling ball. Before that was a trend because that trended all throughout all these different teams or whatever. He was a small, low to the ground kind of dude. But then they kind of went away from that and they got gigantosauruses like Eddie Lacy and T.J. Yeldon and Trent Richardson and Derrick Henry. Anyways, I on one hand, last year was so significant because of now they have a quarterback who's kind of sensational, can
Yeah.
create something out of
The
nothing. He can keep
quarterback
the play
is the focal
going.
point of their offense for once.
Yeah, for once, and that's what's really cool. And now we get to see. Hopefully, last year was great too, but now we get to see what it's going to be like with a Julio Jones, Julio,
Grief, man.
Julio Jones type in Judy, where you're going to be able to see that kind of what am I trying to say, partnership kind of flow pretty well, especially if he can stay healthy, man. I'm telling you, they might break some records if that guy can stay healthy. I don't think the SEC in the West, other than LSU as per usual, I don't see the West this year being that stacked as it normally is. I don't see it being it's always competitive. It's the SEC, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
Repeat.
it means more.
It just means more, man. Whatever the Communist Committee wants you to say. Yes, it's the SEC. It means more, but I just don't think this year, outside of Georgia, LSU, and Bama, I just don't see anybody on that's on their level. So it's going to be a good year for them offensively. It really will, and that's a really unfortunate thing.
Right? No, yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely, yeah, you just are. The West as a whole is full of a bunch of 7 and 8 win teams this year. No one that it really looks like is going to be a big time challenge. I think LSU falls off a little bit from what they were doing last year. I think A&M struggles a little bit from what they did last year. I think Alabama's the only one that really comes back, basically the same. The only caveat that I say to that is that when you do look at this defense, there's a lot more shoes to fill than there have been normally. And a lot of that also comes down to if the offense has been kind of a departure from what Saban has typically done, the defense has stayed the exact same. Normally there is a captain on the field, middle linebacker. I think the only exception that he's had over the years is the time that Minkah Fitzpatrick was there as a safety, and was like the captain or the coach on the field, leader on the field type of player for that defense. But he's almost always had, a standout linebacker who, leads the defense. Normally a defensive line that is not necessarily full of a bunch of headline grabbers, but doesn't ever move. You know what I mean? Like, as a unit, they're unstoppable. Last year was the first time you really saw like a standalone. In Quinnen Williams, you had like this standalone individual freakish talent who obviously outshadowed like his teammates, sort of thing on the Alabama defensive line. That was kind of atypical. You also kind of saw a lack of that linebacker leader that is so signature in a Saban defense last year to an extent. I think a lot of that came down to the fact that Dylan Moses is a young player, but he's coming back. But there's questions there. Like Quinnen Williams is gone. In fact, a lot of that defensive line is gone. A lot of them left. Unlike Auburn, a lot of this defensive line went pro. Williams is gone. A lot of linebackers are graduated, and there's still a lot of questions there. In fact, you pointed out the secondary earlier being, kind of the question from last year. That's the only position group that actually brought just about everyone back.
Totally.
Which is very interesting. So this is going to be a very interesting defense. This isn't surprising. We said in all of our previews with Alabama last year, I think I distinctly remember this coming out of Chandler's mouth at some point, that this is going to be like last year was going to be the first year that the Alabama offense far outshadowed the Alabama defense. And that's what happened. Like they were the bigger storyline. They were the reason behind most of their victories, that sort of thing. This year, I think it's that to a bigger extreme in terms of what is going to be necessary for the defense to do. the issue here, of course, goes back to the fact of what you were saying earlier. They're the type of program that has been recruiting all of these players that they need for the past 3 years. And now all these guys that have just been – they've been backups for 2 seasons. They would have been instant starters any other program in the country. And now they're going to take over, and that's just what you have to deal with. At Alabama. That's what they've got right now. I mean, you go back 2018, their top recruits from then, so rising sophomores, include Iyabi Anoma, 6'5" defensive end, Patrick Surtain II, son of Southern Miss legend Patrick Surtain. I think that's right. I second guessing myself, but a star cornerback recruit, Stephen Wynn, star defensive end, Jalen Armour-Davis, cornerback, Josh Joby, cornerback. So all those positions that they knew that they were going to have to replace at some point, they did a couple years ago, and now these guys are ready to take over. And it could just, completely replenish everything that they have.
Do you think that there's another Quinnen Williams on this team?
If there's going to be a Quinnen Williams, it's likely that it's going to be like their only returning defensive lineman in Raekwon Davis.
Yeah.
Who's another massive human being. I think he's
right.
6'7" or so.
6'7" and 309 pounds. And on that's on one side. On the other side is LeBrian Ray, who's 6'5" and 385. Like, dude, come on. Yeah. What are these people doing?
Exactly.
The military needs you. Stop it.
We could have been shutting down every single anti-American. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If anyone is probably this is it looks like at first glance, without being super familiar with all of this, it kind of looks like this is a group that is going to be more defensive end focused than last year.
Yep.
Quinnen Williams and Isaiah Buggs. I think he was the other interior lineman. The two of them were kind of the stars last season, and now I think it's going to shift to go out to the outside a bit more. And Raekwon Davis and who was that you said was the other guy? LeBrian Ray?
LeBrian Ray, yeah. He's the other massive human on the other side of the line.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a more defensive end oriented defensive line for Alabama this year. So it could mean that teams are able to run a little bit more on the tide, especially the linebackers struggle a little bit. But chances are they're not, because this is Alabama, and they know you control that line, you win the game. It's that simple.
See, even just the way that you and I are talking right now, how we're complimenting Alabama and having to say that, it's just Alabama. Their fans, their alumni, they want to hear us say that. And so in a lot of ways, I don't want to give them credit, but you have to, because I live in reality.
Yeah.
I would love to not be in reality and talk about how this year they are going to tank, and it's going to be the Tua tank. It's going to happen, but I don't.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Tua Tagovailoa.
And the thing is, it's not at all anything about it's not at all anything about it being Alabama for Alabama's sake,
Yeah. No, I hear you.
When I say things like that, it's entirely because they, outside of becoming a little bit more or much more of a pass-oriented offense in the past couple of years, they're the same team that they've been since Nick Saban took over. They go get they get a bunch of offensive linemen who would start anywhere else. They get them all together right there. They get a bunch of defensive linemen that control the line, and they get a captain of the defense, linebacker, or sometimes safety, something like that. And they just work around that. They do that year in and year out. It's not necessarily just this whole we're mystical. This is Alabama. Whoever goes to Alabama must be unstoppable. No. That's the type of team they try to build. So when we say, oh man, they lost a lot of defensive line starters from this past season, then you just know that they have been preparing to replenish those defensive linemen for the past 4 years. The moment they stepped on campus, the moment Quinnen Williams stepped on campus, Nick Saban already had a plan for, okay, this guy is going to have to be replaced sometime, and I'm going to go out there and look for his replacement.
He probably offered that kid a scholarship when he was 14 years old and already had a backup plan for some sixth grader he saw in some podunk town in Alabama and being like, I'm going to offer this. Yeah.
By backup plan, you mean big bag of cash.
Well, I wasn't going to say it. Honest to God, Joseph, these guys are all about amateurism. They honor the game. They would never cheat. It's not Alabama. What are you talking about? So pure, so crimson, so Tide. Come on.
So pure, so crimson, so Tide.
Come on, man. Wow. Come on. Don't throw that nasty darkness on such a pristine, prestigious university with 72 national championships. They're just incredible. Everything about them is so pure, whitewashed. Everything about them.
Name one other team that has won every national championship they have ever that has ever been played in the history.
Easy. Kentucky basketball. Done. Boom.
Oh, I was going to say the 1996 Chicago Bulls. The 96 Chicago Bulls actually claimed every NBA title of all time. So that's what I was going to say. No, you're right. It's just, amateurism reigns supreme.
Reigns supreme with these guys, man. Alabama is so unique in that they actually don't pay players. Like, all the games are free. Because the players definitely don't get paid, so they just let anybody you want who wants to go watch a game just go for free. Like no box seats and everything. It's amazing. It's there's such a pro amateur movement. They're just so good.
I mean, that's the way it would be if we let Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have her way.
And that'll never happen. Roll Tide, Paul. Am I right?
Roll Tide, Paul. All right, now that we've gone entirely off the rails, so much more so than we ever should have ever in our lives.
I don't regret it.
No regrets at all. Let's look at Alabama's schedule real quick. I get the feeling this will be a short discussion. But let's look at their schedule real quick and give a bit of an assessment here on what we think the Crimson Tide will do this year. They start things off with a neutral site game, which I think is stupid, against Duke in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia.
What? So, hey, that's where I am right now. Represent Comfort Suites in Woodstock, GA. Definitely going to get bed bugs. What up?
Mercedes-Benz Comfort Suites in Woodstock. So be careful, man. I was hearing a story on NPR the other day about some people getting Legionnaire's disease from some hotel.
I read about that too, man. I read about that too. I really hope I don't get that disease. It sounds horrible.
Well, be careful. Anyway, they open up neutral site Duke. They got New Mexico State at home. They go on the road to start SEC play against South Carolina. They have, oddly enough, renewing one of their longtime old opponents that they used to play on a consistent basis. The second time they've been referenced on this podcast, the University of Southern Mississippi Golden Eagles.
Big time win.
There you go. Big time win. Ole Miss at home.
Win.
At Texas A&M. Tennessee at home.
Win.
Arkansas at home.
Big time.
LSU at home. Good Lord. Do they play anyone on the road? I don't think they do.
No, they have the best freaking schedule in all of college football. Yeah. Shocker, I know.
Yeah. At Mississippi State.
Lost.
Western Carolina at home, and the non-major opponent to warm up for the Iron Bowl, which is out there in the plains this year.
In the burners.
Yep. I'm not going to lie. This is an incredibly weak schedule.
So the biggest question mark, all right, it's so stupid to even say this. It makes me so mad. The biggest question mark on their schedule is the first one. There's two. The first one is at Texas A&M because we're not really sure how they're going to be with Jimbo. They were better than they were last year, but that still wasn't amazing. So, and they're playing all the way in Texas, so far away in Aggie land. maybe, just maybe, they get Legionnaire's disease in the hotel they're staying at, and all the bed bugs just come and just bite them up, and they lose that game. That's the biggest question mark. So possibly they don't win that game. And when I say possibly, Joseph, I mean, like, if I was a betting man, I'd probably put all the money on Alabama. So that's how I feel about that one. The second question mark is at LSU. You just never know in Death Valley. However, LSU, you can never count them to win because they are led by the world's best Hulk impersonator, Ed Orgeron. So those are the two games that we're having to say, maybe they might lose, just might. Like, all the other ones are going to win. Auburn's not great this year. I know the Iron Bowl, blah, blah, blah. It's just not happening. They are probably going to win out and go to the SEC championship and face Georgia and probably win, and then face maybe Clemson again, maybe some other team that doesn't matter, to give Alabama the national championship. So that's my prediction. Regular season win total at a solid 12-0.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's obvious that LSU is a home game.
I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Yeah. So okay. So, not a huge question mark there. Then big time win.
No. Like their road opponents. I mean, you said Texas A&M. Yeah, that'll be probably a tough one. South Carolina. I mean, no one knows what to expect out of South Carolina anymore. We never do.
Yeah.
Are they going to be? When we think they're going to be trash, they're pretty good. When we think they're actually finally going to be pretty good, they're mediocre at best. Like, you don't ever know with South Carolina.
Long gone are the days of Javian Clowney and that running back that one time. But they still Lattimore. They still have the ghost of Garcia there. Don't ever count out a Garcia. Don't ever count him out.
And by ghost, you mean he's their starting quarterback in his 17th year of eligibility.
I swear to God, he had to have played 15 years at bare minimum. Bare minimum.
Right. But yeah, I mean, outside of the going to Texas A&M, and then you never know what's going to happen in the Iron Bowl. But outside of that, like, none of these games look super terrifying at all. This is
you're count out the Bulldogs of Mississippi State, man. Like, they're probably going to win. They're probably going to black out that game, dude. Probably wear those black jerseys that we always win on.
I do like them.
And I love them. I really hope, though, and I'm be honest, I really hope Beth Mowins is calling that game. Really want her to be calling the Alabama Crimson Tide versus Mississippi State. That would be great.
That's 2 times now you've mentioned a name on this podcast you were never supposed to mention.
Oh man, I've mentioned
first being Colin
Cowherd. Cow turd, Paul.
Roll Tide. But yeah, I mean, this is a schedule where, honestly, if you put most of the teams that Alabama goes up against in this schedule, they're winning 10 of these games. You know,
yep.
Like, you put Mississippi State in this schedule, then there's victories over most of these opponents outside of just like LSU, Alabama, obviously. And then there's the Auburn game. You don't know about Auburn, but it's that sort of thing. Like, you could substitute the SEC West, as I said earlier, is full of a bunch of like 7 and 8 win teams this year. This is a schedule that would allow one of those teams to probably become a 10-win team.
Yep.
You know, maybe Texas A&M, seizes the day like they should, like people are expecting them to this year. And if they had this schedule, shoot, they'd roll up on LSU undefeated. I don't know. They lucked out with a good conference slate.
Do you remember when Nick Saban first took over and they lost to Louisiana Monroe? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe that'll happen this year.
I miss those days. Yeah. Be rooting hard for Southern Miss,
dude,
man.
Come on, Duke. Let's go, Duke. Fighting Cutcliffes. Let's go.
Never overlook Coach Cut. Oh, man. Yeah, so safe to say, after all of this rambling nonsense, that we do expect Alabama to run the gauntlet in the SEC West this year. They've been known to, like, in the past maybe lose one game early on, and then rebound from that and win the conference, so on and so forth. But this, I mean, they don't really look to play a super difficult opponent. I mean, I don't want to overlook Duke, because I do think that Duke has been a very good program under Coach Cut, but like Duke's not going to be as good as they were last year.
No.
So you're talking about before you get in the first 5 games of the season, or pretty much should just be like warm-up games. There's not the threat of a upset in any of those matchups. So that's it. That's it for Alabama. That's it. We're done talking about Alabama.
Good. I hope I never have to talk about them the rest of the year.
Podcast over.
Hey, Alabama fans, if you're listening to this, I'm not sorry for anything I said. I hope you all get beat by all the teams. I hope all of you get Legionnaire's disease. No, I'm just kidding. I shouldn't say that. I don't want anybody to be like really hurt. I just want your emotions to feel just 1 year of what I have felt for the last 27 of my life. Emotional Legionnaire's disease. So like kind of a sad ambivalence to football. You know what I mean? Like really like that.
No one knows what you mean. At this point, not a single person listening has any clue what you mean.
No, man. We had that 1 year at State where we got #1. That was real fun. I enjoyed it. And then it was kind of like, oh man, we're going to be so good. And then we weren't bad. We just didn't kind of like repeat that #1 ranking, which was amazing. It was so much fun. See, it's like we're the opposite of Alabama. Did you ever think about it like that? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just a sad ambivalence about football. Like Alabama, I feel like all you fans, mostly the whole state, really. I mean, y'all don't look good. Like y'all in the news, y'all look bad. I mean, you better cut this off before I start going, dude. I'm going to say something I shouldn't.
I've been trying to shut you up for a long time. I literally yelled podcast over earlier, and you did not.
No, dude, I wasn't. I was reading Nick Saban quotes. You want me to read you one real quick?
One to end the podcast.
One, and this was when they got beat by Louisiana Monroe. Changes in history usually occur after some kind of catastrophic event. It may be 9/11, which sort of changed the spirit of the American relative to catastrophic events. Pearl Harbor kind of got us ready for World War II, and that was a catastrophic event. Homeboy compared awful tragedies to losing Louisiana Monroe. He's trying to make a point of horrible things that shaped history to 19-year-old men winning or losing a college football game. That's how much it means to them. That's why it's so sweet when they lose. Oh, it's so sweet. It's so sweet.
It just means more.
It just means more.
All right. I'm Joseph. That's Road. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Podcast over.